Hello everyone, hope we're all doing well. Welcome to BrightonSEO. My name's Ross Tavendale. I'm the Managing Director of Type A Media. We're kind of known as a kind of boutique agency. We're kind of famous for doing this 4-day work week concept. So the fact that we're here on a Friday, like my team are not super happy about. So hopefully we can deliver on this one. They're all there. I'm also the host of a YouTube show called The Canonical Chronicle as well, which is a kind of weekly SEO show about the kind of SEO news. So today we're going to be talking about data journalism, and in particular what we're going to be going over is how we kind of build kind of big links for our kind of clients. So if you're looking for the kind of tactics and the kind of tips in order to actually pitch the thing to the journalist, we're not going to do that today. We're going to be talking about how we actually make the physical content. So if you go to this blog post that we've done in partnership with Pitchbox, it goes into complete detail about like the entire process of pitching and things of that nature. All right, so let's go on to it. So let's talk about making the thing that gets the links. So I want to tell you a little bit of a story before we kind of get started. So let me take you back to 2012. Now, I can't see anyone in the audience, but I assume that you're old enough to remember 2012. So we just won an airline as a client, which was a really, really big deal for us. They had a brand new domain we were migrating them over to, which not ideal when you're taking on a new client. So we thought we'd bolster that by building a bunch of links into it to kind of build up the domain, and this is how this kind of worked out. Here's the kicker. It was a £50,000 a month retainer. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I was like a bright-eyed and bushy-tailed SEO account manager, and someone gives me 50 grand to buy some links, what's the first thing you're going to do with that? You're also going to have a strategy session to make sure that you're planning in things correctly and delivering value for the client. But when we were thinking about it, I was like, can I even spend 50 grand on link building? And I was kind of scratching my head thinking, well, what department in the agency would be particularly good at helping us spend money indiscriminately and generally pissing things up against the wall? So we talked to the creative department. And they talked us through something called an ideation session. Now, for people who are not agency people in here, the word ideation, you've probably felt a little bit sick in your stomach there. It's like, oh, did that agency guy just say ideation on a stage? Oh my God. So for all intents and purposes, an ideation session, from what I can gather, is sitting on a beanbag and looking out of a window. But this particular, what I'd call the alpha creative, he called himself the creative director, came up with some subjective opinions on what he thought was best for the client. And to be fair to the guy, like there was definitely some good ideas. This Apple Watch concept where we were going to send people to like Brighton Pier, send them to the Eiffel Tower with this heart rate monitor and compare it to like real TripAdvisor ratings so we could see like, does your bio indicators actually show that this is an exciting place or not, which is kind of cool. Classically, there's an old guy who's like, let's do an integrated campaign with QR codes, and we're like, okay. And so, like, after a couple of ideas, kind of going backwards and forwards, we'd had, like, all the biggest minds in the agency in rooms. There was Post-its everywhere. There's whiteboards that covered in text. This big, massive, beautiful deck. We finally settled on the concept. And it was a fucking infographic, wasn't it? Because, like, that's what we do. We build infographics. To be fair, it was a phenomenal infographic. And my commercial director made sure the client knew that it was a phenomenal infographic. So we pitched it to the client, which I always think is a bit weird, right? Because as the client, their job is to look after the profit and loss account and manage agency resource. But for some reason, they're making creative decisions on what we're going to do for their PR and link building. So yeah, they then use their subjective opinion. They're like, yeah, we'll have that one. And we're like, great. So we go make it. We give it to the outreach team, and some really, really amazing things start to happen. Do you want to guess how many links that we got out of that? But in fact, tell you what, because I can't see anyone, so you can't put your hands up. By like round of applause, how many people think we got like 100 links? No, fuck you guys. Nobody thinks we get any links. 50? 1. 10? Great, thanks. We actually got 0. Well, we got 2, but 2 were from my personal travel blogs at the time. So why did this happen? Well, ultimately, it wasn't objective. It was just people's opinions in the room. There's no frameworks, although I kind of take the piss out of ideation. There is something in there, and we're going to go through how we actually kind of do that. It was through the lens of the same people in the room. So it was a room full of like white, straight, male 30-year-olds. And don't get me wrong, like I am one of those people, and I think I'm great. But the problem is that when you're building out these sort of PR campaigns, you need to see things through from like different angles and different lenses. So that didn't really help. They had no concept of flop risk either, so one of the big problems with people coming from a traditional advertising world and creative and moving into search is that the way that you de-risk a campaign when it comes to traditional advertising is you spend money. So if you're spending 300 grand on a television placement to get 1 million or so impressions, 90% of those people could absolutely hate it, but you've still got 100,000 people that like it, so it just naturally works. But in search, we don't have that, but we do have these methodologies, and this is what we're going to get into today. So we have this thing called Raptor, and again, apologies to anyone who's not in an agency. We have like initialisms for absolutely everything, so you'll just need to bear with me. We're going to take you through the RAP part of it today. If you're interested in the TOR, which is the outreach bit, that's on the Pitchbox blog. So we're going to take you through how we do the research, build the angles, and then actually do the pitches as well. It all revolves around this little thing here. It's called a RAP sheet. So essentially what we're doing is we're finding all the links to all the data that we're going to be pulling in. We're then saying, okay, so this one piece of data, perhaps it's a database or a flat table or anything like that. How many angles can I get of that? How many stories can I build around this stuff? And then we're writing down, why should people care about it and who will care about it? And I don't know if you've ever came up with your own ideas and then wrote down 3 reasons why it's good. Very, very quickly you start throwing things in the bin because you can't come up with 3 ideas why it would be good. Really simple exercise and really effective. We also just to de-risk everything. So the thing is, if you're doing 3 and 3, that actually multiplies out to 9 potential pitches you can do from a single piece of content. And for the mathematicians in here, that means that you only need to really be successful 11% of the time. So if we actually had this methodology with that big 50K budget, instead of it being 100% success rate or nothing, it would have been 1 in 9 times, and we probably would have done a lot better. So in terms of building this stuff out, we kind of need to start with the audience. In order to do that, we go into Facebook Audience Insights as our kind of first port of call. If you've got first-party CRM data, what you can do is take that data and upload it to Facebook and get an idea of what those people look like from a kind of demographic. You can do a bit of data enrichment on your customer base. One thing to note, if you need to check with your kind of GDPR guy just to make sure that you're not going to get sued by the EU for breaking any regulations. If you're an agency and it's too hard to get the client's CRM, you can literally just put keywords and products in there and it'll start kicking things out. So I've done this example for this term, casino games, and we're looking for outliers here. So apparently, people who like casino games are 48% more likely to be engaged, which is lovely. But they're 58% less likely to be married. So if you're going home tonight and your fiancé is sitting at home playing a casino game, doesn't look like it's going to work out for you. So if we start looking into more interesting things, and a lot of people say, well, this doesn't work for B2B and yada, yada, yada. Well, it actually does. If we look at people who like investment banking, we can see things like they're attached to the pages 10 ways to make money. Great. And Nando's, which is kind of weird, right? That's a bit of a data outlier, because you don't think of an investment banker with his pinstripe suit on, sitting, having his peri-peri chicken. It's just not something that kind of sits in your head. They also really like Lynx, and they shop at JD Sports, so it's highly likely that they smell and dress like teenagers. And they're kind of a safe, kind of an edgy, so they like things like N-Dubs and Tinchy Strider, which are hip-hop and urban, but very mainstream hip-hop and urban. And also they think a public figure counts as the urban dance band diversity, which, fair enough, whatever floats your boat. And they're preoccupied with the country of Wales, which is another strange outlier. Types of content those people are sharing, you can start getting an idea of this person in your head. You're like, oh, I would love to be friends with this person. So they share things like Bond, James Bond, but which James Bond are you? So you can start to see the type of person that we're kind of talking about here. So once we've done that, we kind of basically understand who we're kind of dealing with. We write on a whiteboard, just like this person is not. And then we start making a bunch of assumptive statements about them. So for example, if I see things like, this person likes Heinz and Marmite, etc., I will say this person is into heritage brands. If I see this person likes watching Dad's Army, I'll say this person is more traditional rather than, authentic or something like that. I'm just building out an idea of who they are. And then we put it into the ideation framework. So I went from taking the piss out of the word ideation to we actually use it. And this is a framework that we use. So literally on a whiteboard, we're going to write identity, utility, social information. I'm going to tell you what all those kind of things mean and what we're looking to draw out of that to make this content. Identity it's a piece of content that expresses who I am better than I can express it. So classic example would be it's hard out there for a lefty. So an example of that in the news, like saying things like you're more likely to be a genius, you're left-handed. Great, because people who identify as being left-handed are going to be sharing this stuff, so it's much easier to pitch it in and get a link for it. Why you shouldn't ever mess with gingers. This is actually a really amazing piece of content marketing. It's a casino that done this, by the way. This particular one, this is for people who identify as Ed Sheeran fans, but also identify as being ginger. Double identity, really, really nice. This is a good one. People with ginger hair have genetic superpowers. Fair enough. Double identity again. People who identify as being ginger, and people who identify as being completely deluded. So that's two pieces of identity there as well. Utility is just making something useful for the end person, so that could be a calculator or a map or something like that. We've done a bit of keyword research for a fitness client. It was a lot of this stuff about what does 2,000 calories look like. We looked at the audience information, hilariously. The things that they were most, had the highest affinity to was like KFC, McDonald's, things like that. So we do, what does 2,000 calories look like inside of fast food? Same with a skincare brand, like when we looked at their audience, it was all like skewed towards young females and they were preoccupied with like gin and champagne and Prosecco. So things like this work really well. Social information is a little bit more insidious in that it kind of reinforces what you already think or seeks to break a preconceived bias that you've got. So we've heard a lot about this in the news, like in your kind of own little social bubble, as you start liking particular pieces of content, what happens is you just get fed more and more and more of it. So a classic example would be like Londoners found to be most miserable in the UK. When we look at the audience information on this, we can see that A, they don't live in London. They're like 200% less likely to live in London. They're all homeowners. Like Top Gear and Jeremy Clarkson comes up really high. Daily Mail comes up really high. So you can think, well, probably a bit more cantankerous, hates Londoners. So things like this work really well. Now, when it comes to making this stuff, you don't actually need to be very fancy. This is just Google Trends. And it says for the keyword allergies, it's kind of going up over time. Which is all very well and good. But if we were to apply one of these ideation frameworks to it, let's say, for example, identity, and the identity was this person is a baby boomer, this person, again, is a bit more kind of cantankerous, perhaps they're like a really big Jeremy Clarkson fan, and they read the Daily Mail. And just by taking that, you can change the headline in order to make it actually get picked up. And this is actually a real story that we created based off of one trend information piece, and the Daily Mail actually printed it. So the methodology for this is the content actually finds the audience, which is the opposite way that we kind of usually do things. So classically, we just make the thing, find the publications and the journalists we want to publish it, and we just ram it down their throats until like they block us or they actually give us the link. That's the classic way to do it. But with this, we're actually starting with the person that's going to consume it, deliberately making it for that person, going into these little niche Facebook groups and starting I'm just leaving this here. And then they start to share it and share it and share it. When it gets social proof, we then actually start the outreach. And this is the kind of framework for it. Make sure that when you're looking at audience insights, if you see something that comes up like this audience are really into things like Mario Kart, that's too niche specific. So you need to have it wide enough so you can drill down, because the idea being that you're going to go for nationals first, then you're going to go for niche publications like magazines like Wired and things like that. You can keep drilling down to community sites and blogs, and then all the kind of fanatic stuff as well. The data sources. So there's three kind of main types of data that we use for this sort of thing. We've got private data from your analytics. We've got public data from government databases, universities, things of that nature. And also potential data from kind of surveys and kind of professional commentary, things of that nature. So, who is mining their own analytics? So we were dealing with this recruitment company, and we were having a look at their analytics, and some really interesting stuff popped out. Apparently, The place where you can get the most apprenticeships as a tradesman is in a town called East Kilbride, which is like 10 minutes outside of Glasgow. It's a really obscure data point, and we validated it and backed up, and that was in fact correct. And the reason that worked is because looking at the Ideation Framework, you've got identity. I identify as a tradesman. I identify as someone from East Kilbride, and also the social information part as well. It's like we think that industrial towns, there's less opportunities for young people, but that actually breaks that social information. We disprove that. Mashing up with other data sources is also a really, really great one. So a lot of clients come to us with like white papers all the time, which, great, fantastic. You spent a bunch of time putting together this data in this white paper. The problem is it's not really built with the intent of like traveling or being sold into press. So we need to mash it up with other stuff. In this particular example, the client owned an esports team, and we had all their salary information. And we compared the people playing FIFA on their PlayStation to actual Premiership players, and we found out that 80% of FIFA gamers are paid more than the Premiership. That's cool. That hits two things in particular. Breaks the social information that kids sitting at home in their underpants playing FIFA are wasting their life, because they're not. They're getting paid more than professional athletes. And that's another thing for identity, because I identify as a gamer, I identify as this. So that's how these sort of things start working. Public data. Who's ever flown Ryanair? I can't see you putting your hands up. I'll just assume you're just hanging yourself when I said Ryanair. So if you remember, it was about a year ago now, they cancelled 500,000 flights. And the way they told their customers was they put it in a PDF and just stuck it on the site. And it's like, there you go, peasants, work out if your flight's cancelled. We don't have time for you. My grandmother was scheduled to come from Glasgow to London to see me. And the thing is, I was thinking, she can't use Control F. She doesn't know what that does. So I just seen her like poor wee arthritic hand scrolling and scrolling and scrolling through this PDF trying to find her flight number. So we got our data scientist, Dr. Nina, to go scrape that out, data warehouse it, and turn it into a little tool where you put your flight number in, and then it tells you if it's cancelled or not, and if it is cancelled, a direct link to get a refund. As you can imagine, finding a journalist that also hates Ryanair and wants to kind of jab them a little bit was really easy. So that's why that particular one worked, because it's people who identify with a common good and breaking or confirming social information. We're confirming that we have a bias against this budget airline because of like how they mistreat customers. Slicing it a little bit differently. So this is a utility play. So you remember, I think it was just before summer, the government published all of the gender pay information for all the kind of major corporations, which in itself is very interesting, but it doesn't tell a story and it doesn't really provide itself into an actual audience or anything like that. So what we've done is we started thinking, well, okay, inside of this, where can we like start with identity? And when we're looking at the client's audience profile on Facebook, there was things like Save Our NHS, like nurses, like admin pages, things like that. I'm like, okay, so these people probably work in the medical community. So why don't we look at NHS Trust, pull that data out and make it easily searchable? And that worked really well as well, because we're playing on the social information of we love the NHS, and we're playing the social information of we think that there's a gender pay problem, particularly when it comes to hospitals. And then the identity part was I identify as a nurse and I identify as a supporter of the NHS. So that one worked insanely well. How to find public data. Now, hilarious, someone actually tweeted about this like a couple of weeks ago when Google Data Search came out. It's like cue all of the PR talks at Brighton changing their slides. So all of these slides are now completely redundant, but I'm going to go through them anyway. If you're looking for any sort of public data, we used to use a lot of cite commands. So for example, instead of going into like the Office for National Statistics database and like scrolling through everything, we just do cite command .gov and the actual URL itself, then the keyword that we're looking to kind of hit. You don't need to do that now. So Google have released data search. So essentially you go in, put any keyword or topic in, and it just pulls every single data set that it's managed to get. And we've double-checked them. A lot of them are very good, UK sources and American sources. And it's from like universities, governments, you name it. One of the most obscure ones was like looking at comparing hair color to shoe size. So I mean, it's not like it's just like really bad, stuffy information. It's like really weird and niche stuff as well. Potential data. So we love this stuff. So Potential data, we do a lot of freedom of information requests. Essentially, you can email any kind of public body and ask them to release data. For example, if I wanted to see how many ambulance call-outs have happened up and down the country at football grounds, they'll just do that work for me and send it to me, which is amazing. The great thing about this as well is when you go to actually pitch this into the journalist, you put your press release in it, but you leave the chain from the government going backwards and forwards because it's really easy for them to validate that information. And the last one is Google surveys. One of the things I would say if you're going to use this for your data journalism campaigns, do not pitch nationals and broadsheets with any sort of Google survey data. It can work, but in our experience, it doesn't tend to work. So I remember pitching this thing to the Guardian from a Google survey, and we literally just got, I love the journalists for doing this, they just email back, single line, lol. I was like, okay, thanks. But places like the Star and the Metro and the tabloids will take that sort of data. So this is really it. So I mean, you're never going to have a viral success with any of this kind of approach, but the idea is you're going to have like really repeatable and really defensible ways of putting this stuff together. So the next time you're putting together a PR campaign or any sort of creative outreach and you're just coming up with subjective ideas, I hope you can use this framework to kind of make it a little bit more data-driven. So when you're sitting in a boardroom with the C-suite and they're like, why are we doing this again? You can say, well, because the data says so. That's everything from me. Thank you very much.
Excellent. So